These are the fields that shaped the fortunes of Niagara-on-the-Lake. But wars and treaties changed everything. By the early 1800s, European settlers had established firm roots, and the 19th century became one of rebuilding. Families like the Balls, the Freys, the Clements, Servos, Castlemans, Woodruffs and the Waters all helped to rebuild the farmlands and a struggling economy, because one thing hasn't changed. Agriculture is still the backbone of the economy here in Niagara, but today it's facing some significant challenges.
So I have about 90 acres under vine, and then buildings and houses and stuff. And nowadays, 90 acres is, we live a good lifestyle in that. But if it wasn't for me working off the farm and trying to do other things, it just ain't going to happen. The tonnage that was grown in Niagara region has not increased from the early 1900s. So tonnages have stayed the same, but there used to be apples and vegetables and then all the fruits, sour cherries, peaches, strawberries, you name it, all those things. That's all shrunk because what happens is, they call it the scale economy. To be able to be sustainable now, and equipment and all that stuff, you have to be a certain size because we can't compete with Oregon and Washington and all that stuff. So if you're in the peach game, you needed to get bigger and you needed to be able to do all those things. Whereas now, if you had 10 acres of peaches, well, forget it, not going to happen.
Richard Andres comes from a farming family, and his family saw a lot of changes right through the 70s to the 90s.
Especially in the last 20 years, even the peaches have switched to grapes. And what's really dramatic is you come down along York Road and look to Niagara Lake to the lake. This is when you really all of a sudden realize what happened. All you see is grapes and windmills, wind machines. It's just dramatic.
But of course the most dramatic change in farming happened in the mid-1930s, when the Mennonites arrived and changed this land completely. They were escaping Europe and 400 years of persecution. And this was the dirty 30s. Jobs were scarce, and no one had much money. But Peter Wall, a Russian Mennonite, bought land, and he sold parcels of that land to other Mennonites for a promise and handshake. The Mennonites knew how to work this soil. They planted peaches, and more peaches, with strawberries and tomatoes between the rows. Soon there were orchards, a school, a church, a credit union, penners, and of course the cannery. And jobs. And during the war years, many of those farming jobs were taken up by these amazing young women, the farmerettes. Molly ENNS was just 7, and with her mother and young brother, she also escaped the Russians and the Germans after hiding in strangers' homes with the threat of death wherever they went. Her mother had sewn her true identity papers into her clothes. Life was very different at Parliament Oaks School and Eden Christian College.
Once I got out of school, it wasn't very long. I worked at the Bell for a little while, and then I got married into a farming family. I was 19, just a kid. Peter ENNS, my husband's name. It was a family farm that he took over when he was 19, because his parents were much older. And it was on Lakeshore Road. It's still there, the red brick house on Lakeshore Road, Lakeshore and Stewart. They expropriated, I think, 2,000 acres, starting from the lake down, they were going to do a new section of the Welland Canal with double locks. It never happened. But they did let us lease the property, which allowed us to have an income while we bought this place where there was nothing on. And actually, they just bought the farm back here a year or two ago. It's in the family again, yes. And at that time, it was mostly peaches, cherries, plums, strawberries, and all of those products have now it's down to peaches and grapes. And then, of course, when the canning factory closed, that was a huge problem.
We used to have the only canning factory east of the Rockies in North America, 2 kilometers from here, 3 kilometers from here, and it's gone. It went to China. I'm not crying the blues. That's the way it is. I knew what I was getting into when I started it. So, but I gotta love You ask any of these farmers here, they got dirt and diesel in their blood. They're doing it because they love it, and it's been good to us.
More than 2,000 workers from the Caribbean and Mexico come here to work on Niagara's farms each year. They've also been good to Niagara. They've made sure the crops are healthy and harvested, and for the last 50 years, they've helped those farms to survive.
So the SAP program, Seasonal Agricultural Workers Program, started in 1966. That's when the serious expansion of farms and tender fruit really happened, was in the late 60s, early 70s. Farms were expanding. They had a dependable workforce. At that point, it was all Caribbean. And then around 1973, 74, that's when Mexico asked to be invited into the program. So then you started to see more Mexicans up here. And of course, with the collapse of the tender fruit industry, the canning industry, when CanGrow shut down, then there was a wholesale change into grapes for a variety of reasons, and which, of course, is mechanized harvesting. So again, another huge shift in agriculture here. When I went to Jamaica in 2007, I was really struck by the dignity with which they lived their lives back home, the respect they had in their community, how they were raising their children, the values that we shared. And I just thought the contrast between how they lived their lives back home and how they were treated up here and had to live really struck me. That was a game changer.
Niagara's wine industry continues to offer world-class award-winning wines. Investments in viticulture, innovation is paying off. Dedicated winemakers are becoming legendary and standing on the shoulders of the likes of Carl Kaiser, Paul Bosc, or John Neufeld. The future will embrace advances in disease management, the demand for greenhouse cultivation, food security and sustainability, and those ever-shifting consumer trends.
But what concerns me is when I see major developments going in, especially on sensitive watershed areas, what's happening upstream. I mean, we can really see just in the last 20 years the difference between what happens now in spring and winter with the runoff.
Once we take that good ground away, it's never coming back. It's gone. For a very short period of time, we're noisy, dusty, and smelly. And we are. And we're inconvenient, and we're early, and we're all that.